Thank you, Nomi and Sid. You know, they are the reasons actually we are here, Anne and myself. And they are another proof. And this evening is another proof that there is no free lunch or free stay at their home. You know, we are staying at their beautiful home here in Newtown, but we have to work for that. That's why we're here. But we really want to thank both Nomi and Sid for this great hospitality and their friendship, and also for being such staunch supporters of the Israel, being such proud Jews and really making such great connections that strengthening the relationship between Israel and the United States. I want to also thank very much Rabbi Weinstein, Aryeh Weinstein, for actually allowing us to have this evening, and you, and yes, we also had the pleasure of meeting Rabbits and Rosie, and really you are a power couple, and may you go from strength to strength. Chabad, I've always been a great fan of Chabad. You know, I always say that the Mashiach will come faster only because of Chabad. So thank you for all your work, and really thank you for putting Israel first, because Jewish life is not Jewish without Israel. And this is what Chabad does. And I'm not going to belabor about different kinds of streams in Judaism, but I think Chabad is the real thing. So thank you very much. Also had the pleasure to see here a friend and colleague of Rabbi Weinstein here, Rabbi Shem Tov, which is a is one of great many Shem Tov rabbis, a great Chabad leadership family. I've worked and known Rabbi Levi Shem Tov, brother of Rabbi Shem Tov here in Washington, D.C., who is still the rabbi in Washington, D.C. I know their father, so it's kind of like coming home. And it's really great to see so many of you here. Although, let me tell you the truth, I just hate to be here. Why? No reflection on you, of course. It's because I would have rather be somewhere else at this point, and basically in Gaza. Why am I saying that? Because I was drafted into the military right after the Yom Kippur War. In Yom Kippur War, we sustained heavy losses. 50% of all our tanks and tank crews were decimated. So I was one of those who filled in the ranks. I served in the Armored Corps for about 25 years, including the reserves, made a captain. And I see today what the Armored Corps is doing in Gaza. It just fills me with pride. I think what the IDF is proving in Gaza is that there is no better fighting machine than the IDF. The war in Gaza is very, very complicated, very complex. We have never realized, we will talk about how we got into there. I mean, we will say now, we got into here, why? Because we slumbered. Very, very precise and short. This is what we slumbered. We got into here because we replaced deterrence with appeasement. You know what is appeasement? Churchill gave the best description, or he really understood what appeasement was. He said appeasement is someone who keeps feeding the crocodiles, hoping that they would eat him last. This is what the Europeans did with Nazi Germany. When Hitler got into the Sudeten in the Czech Republic, when he got into the Rhine against the agreement of 1918, the end of World War I, when he built his army machine, the Germans were not supposed to build this army machine according to the Versailles back in 1918. They were supposed to be non-militarized. They did it, and from the get-go, everybody in the world let them do that. That is appeasement. And when you let them do that, that bolsters the other side. They understand that you are not serious, that you are a appeaser, and that you are afraid to show your strength. And the end is, instead of finishing the threat with a small war, you're waiting and waiting until all of a sudden you face a big war. And this is the same thing that happened with Hamas. In 2005, when we left Gaza altogether in the hope that the Palestinians will, they wanted their territory, they wanted end of quote-unquote occupation. Here, we gave them a chance to become a nation that can really invest in themselves, can flourish, can coexist with us, and, the sky was the limit. What did they do instead? They ruined every infrastructure that we left. We left Gaza with a lot of industrial infrastructure, agriculture infrastructure. It was Hamas already then that burned out everything, all the nurseries, the greenhouses, and we didn't realize that. We didn't realize what is coming. Then in 2007, when they kicked out the Fatah, the PLO, they started their military machinery. And we allowed that to happen. In 2009, if you remember Operation Cast Lead, they started shooting rockets at us. What did we do? We answered tit for tat. The round finished with what? With Hamas getting money from Qatar. This was 2009. Then it was 2014, if you remember also, the operation of 2014. Tit for tat. By the way, 2014 started with kidnapping of 3 Jewish boys and killing them. And then they found, and then they shot rockets. Another tit for tat. 2014 ended up with what? Ceasefire, and what? Hamas getting more money. Same thing was in 2018, same thing with 2020. To the extent that the Israeli government, just to keep the quiet, agreed that the Hamas will get $30 million on a monthly basis from Qatar, money that was coming in suitcases. That means no checks, no balances, all this money, where it went, into building this huge infrastructure of tunnels and underground bunkers. But it was not enough. Hamas also demanded that the people of Gaza will come to work where? In Israel. They didn't create employment for the Gazans in Gaza, right? Actually, they ruined any chance for employment there with ruining the infrastructure that we had left behind. They insisted that they would come to work in Israel, and Israel allowed it. The last round, we allowed 15,000 to come in. And then, just 2 weeks before the 7th of October, the Hamas threatened again with attacks on Israel and rockets. Not only that, they sent thousands of Gazan people to the fence, right close to our fence, in some kind of demonstration. And instead of shooting them and threatening them, we allowed them to come all the way to the fence. What happened in the fence? They came in, among these thousands who came, there were Hamas-trained terrorists who were planting explosive devices along the fence. And in order for them to stop coming to the fence and to stop threatening about another round, what did Israel government agree to do? Give them more money. And what else? Increase the number of Palestinian workers. Not only 15,000, now they were coming 20,000 on a daily basis to Israel. In hindsight, about half of them were scouters for Hamas. And in hindsight, we found with the terrorists who came in the October 7th, they had maps, accurate maps, military issued almost, of not only every Jewish community and kibbutz, but in every kibbutz exactly what family lives where was the, we had these guard squads, where they were, where did they store their weapons, everything was well known to them, even the military bases. They knew exactly in the military bases what was going on. So this is appeasement. We thought, or Israeli governments thought, that you just buy peace. By the way, it was all Israeli governments from the government of Sharon all the way now. It was the Olmert government, it was the first Netanyahu, second, third, and fourth Netanyahu governments, Bennett government, and again, this current Netanyahu government. All Israeli governments. So this was appeasement. What is deterrence? Deterrence is, first of all, to have the capabilities to defend oneself by oneself. And Israel has the capability to defend ourselves by ourselves, as we show it now. But this is not enough. This is only one component of deterrence. The other one is the will to use your capability to defend yourselves. And it seemed like we have lost the will. And this is what the Hamas people, that's how they read us. They read us that we are afraid to deploy, we are afraid to sacrifice, we're afraid to fight. And indeed, from 2005 until now, there were no ground operations in Gaza. Every round, as I mentioned, from 2009 until now, ended with more money and more Palestinians coming to work in Israel. And they read us, and they realized we have become soft. We are now relying on all technology. We are a first-rate country, but we are very, very soft and not willing to fight. So the cause of the October 7th is the perception. Now they realize it's a misperception that Israel was not willing to fight and defend itself anymore. By the way, the same thing will happen in the north, in the Hezbollah. Hezbollah in 2006, when the Second Lebanon War finished, it finished with a document. The document is called 1701. Why 1701? This was the United Nations Security Council resolution that finished the war with Hezbollah. And this is Security Council resolution. It was decreed that the Hezbollah first will disarm, and secondly, will pull back north, away from the border of Israel, north of the Litani River, if you know the topography. What happened since 2006? Not only Hezbollah did not disarm, on the contrary. Since then until now, they got more than 2,000 different rockets and missiles, and you name it. Since then, in the last 3 years, they encroached and began crossing the Litani border all the way to our border. Right now, they are sitting on our border. And we did not react to the first rocket. We did not react to the first breach of the agreement. And instead of nipping it in the bud 10 or 12 years ago, now we have a big problem, the Hezbollah. But we will talk with the Hezbollah later. But this is the same way of operation that happened in Gaza. Gaza is no different in terms of the dynamics than what happened in the north. So we did slumber. We did face a brutal attack. I'm not going to go into the details. I'm sure many of you have seen some of the videos, have read some of the testimonies. The 7th of October was the worst day for the Jewish people since the end of the Holocaust. In terms of numbers, how many were killed and murdered, the way they were murdered brutally, and mutilated bodies and all that. And also in terms of the depth of this hatred. We lost 1,200 in the first day of the 7th of October. Out of them, about 350 soldiers. They came with about 3,000 of their commando units, the terrorist unit, the Nukhba it's called. 3,000, just think, 3,000 terrorists of Hamas coming in 20 different break-ins into the fence, 20, and they knew exactly where to go. They deployed in a very efficient way, and the results were very, very grim for us. Now, they, of course, boasted a great victory. I don't know if you had the chance to see that. All those leaders of Hamas came out in front of the television. They were praying and cheering and whatever and how, how better soldiers they are. Here, the IDF, what was thought to be invincible, has turned to be, in their eyes, a paper tiger. And indeed, 1,200 dead in less than 24 hours out of these 350 soldiers. Now, if you look into the details, I mean, it's the 350 soldiers, most of them were administrative. Half of them did not even have weapons issued to them. Just think, the IDF, on a border, positions, didn't think that they need weapons. Some of them were intelligence, some of them were, scouts, some of them administrative. Many of them were the ones who staffed the Erez crossing, the crossing between Gaza and Israel, that allowed the Palestinians to come and work in Israel, that allowed some humanitarian aid to come from Israel to the Palestinians. So many of the soldiers were actually administrative, helping the Palestinians themselves. So about half of them were just murdered, killed when they were still in bed, or taken hostages. And here there was the big celebration by Hamas. Well, it took the military 24 hours actually to get their act together. And first of all, to clear the positions, 3,000 terrorists. First of all, we had to get rid of them. And many of them were captured and killed and then pushed back. And then to get the operational plans that also were deep down in the drawers. The military has to start doing military stuff from scratch. And the ground operation started about 3 weeks after the 7th of October. If you recall, 27th of October, this is when we started the ground operation. Now, since the ground operation started, we lost until now 173, and every life is a dear life. 173 soldiers, special ops, armored, artillery, infantry, of course. And the Palestinians lost about 9,000. So this is the ratio. So when it came to a real battle between Israeli fighting force and the terrorists, they were no match. Even though they were hiding behind human population, even though they were digging deep down, they are taken almost one by one. And when you hear the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health of Gaza talking about 22,000 dead, just know that half of them are terrorists with rifles or with detonators or with any kind of explosions that they're out to kill us. So these are all legitimate targets, let alone the fact that according to the Geneva Convention, if one uses a hospital or a mosque or a school as a military position, it is a legitimate target. But even though the Israeli military was very precise, I don't think there's any other military that would be so precise and so efficient. As I mentioned, half of the casualties are terrorists. It's kind of a gruesome numbers and figures and ratios, but militaries around the world are dealing with this kind of ratios. So let me tell you that the ratio of one casualty of uninvolved to one terrorist is something that has never happened before in history. In the Allied operations in Iraq against ISIS, do you remember Fallujah? Do you remember Mosul, the rubbles that were left there? Well, the ratio there was 20-1. Of every terrorist that was killed by Allied forces in Iraq or in Syria, 20 civilians were killed. I'm not talking about wars in the past. Wars in the past, if you think about Hiroshima or Dresden in Germany, we're talking about thousands to one. Here, it's a ratio of 1-1. It's unheard of. And for that, we pay a heavy price. the 173 casualties that we have had, and also more than 1,000 injured, is because the military is doing its job in the most, I would say, clean way as possible. And this is why, of course, Hamas is crying war crimes, and so are the Palestinians and the Palestinian allies. But the reason that so far we have the United States and Europe not condemning Israel. Every now and then you would hear something about, okay, you have to be more careful and all that. But the fact that we're not outright condemned is because they understand that no military, certainly not their own military, would do any better or cleaner job than the IDF. So this is where we are now. We're in the midst of the war. We are winning the war. It's a hard war, but it takes time because we find out. And again, we go back to the appeasement theory. We go back to the slumbering. The IDF didn't realize that the entire Gaza territory has 2 layers underneath, and 500 kilometers of multi-level tunnels. Sometimes you have these shafts with elevators going deep down 150 feet, with ballrooms, with command centers, with, of course, offices, command and control, communication, you name it. And we have to take these tunnels one by one. Of course, one thing to do it is just to put very, very high-powered explosives, but that would really sink Gaza totally underground. And that's why we have to do it very carefully. Some idea was to just flush it all with the salt water, with the, from the Mediterranean. But evidently this also would do damage to the environment. There is this aquifer, the underground, deep underground water. So if you flush them with salt water, it can seep in, and that there will not be drinkable water in Gaza anymore. So we are not doing that either. So nobody in the world can accuse us of being, disproportional or doing anything which actually is not in the up and up in terms of humanity and in terms of consideration of human population. Gaza will be won. Will take 1 more month, 2 less months, but it will be won. The question is, what do we do after Gaza? One thing is certain: it cannot be turned into the Palestinians. We have now a history that cannot be denied. Every territory Israel leaves becomes a launching pad of terror against us. And this is, if I just go a little bit, with 30,000 feet view, this is the tragedy of the Palestinians. Because just as they lost, in 1948 and in 1937, and all the time since then, in 2002, the Second Intifada, the 7th of October will be remembered as the day where the Palestinians lost forever any chance of a Palestinian state that they wanted to. Because we are not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. And if you look at the Palestinians and their leadership, they have always made the wrong decisions. First of all, they made the wrong decisions on the basis of misunderstanding the Jewish people. The resolve of the Jewish people, the strengths of the Jewish people, the understanding of the Jewish people that not only this is our home and we don't have anywhere to go, but we are willing to die there in order to ensure Jewish life and continuation. Rabbi Weinstein mentioned that 3,300 years ago, actually we became a nation in Har Sinai, Mount of Sinai. We became the people 3,800 years ago with Abraham. We became a sovereign state 3,000 years ago by King David. And since then until now, Israel was reestablished in 1948, and it was not established, as some believe, by the UN or because of guilt of the Europeans after the Holocaust. We were established long 3,000 years ago, and we don't have to thank anybody for being back in our home, and we're not going to go anywhere. Palestinians thought that, they have the numbers, they have the countries, 22 Arab countries, 57 Muslim countries, one Jewish state, that they can overrun us because we are outnumbered. But just as they were proven wrong in 1937, the first time where partition plan was introduced, dividing Palestina, and I don't have to explain here, the Palestina, the Roman name of Palestina, into a Jewish state and an Arab state. They rejected it. 48, they rejected it. In 2000, they rejected it. In 68, 67, they rejected it. In 2002, they rejected it after the Oslo Agreement. And the same thing now. So the 7th of October would be always a day of remembrance in Israel. But for the Palestinians, I think it will be a day that they thought is a day of joy, but they will be a day that they will want to forget. And the Palestinian leadership always sided with the wrong allies. In 1930s and 1940s, their allies were the Nazis. Haj Amin al-Husseini, which is the first, I would say, modern Palestinian leader, if you can call it the Palestinian. They were not called Palestinians, they were called Arabs. But anyway, the Arab of Palestine, the Mufti, went to Hitler back in 1941 with the plea to do in Israel what they do in Europe. The Nazis were vanquished, so were the Palestinians then. Then, during the Cold War, they sided with the Soviets. And with the Soviets, as the Soviet Union crumbled, so did they. By the way, this is why they came in 1993 to the Oslo Agreement. Arafat understood that he had no more ally. Just as the Nazis were vanquished in World War II, no allies for the Palestinians, lost everything. Same thing in 1993, after the Soviets were gone as a superpower, then he came to the Oslo. Didn't change his ideology one bit, but he thought, he can win in different means. In 1990, just before Oslo, they sided with Saddam Hussein. And now they're siding with Iran. And when I look geopolitically at the situation right now, I'm saying, well, maybe 7th of October was bound to happen. Maybe we could not have prevented it, but once it happened, it's going to show again that Israel is there to stay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Iran and the Iranian situation, and to maybe make some analogy to the Soviet Union. Before the Soviet Union crumbled under its own weight of corruption and economic inefficiency, Gorbachev was asked to describe the situation. What is the situation in the Soviet Union? And he said, in one word, it's good. So he was asked to elaborate. Can you say what it is in 2 words? He said, in 2 words, it's not good. Why am I saying that? Because if I would ask one of the Ayatollahs, the Iranian leaders, to describe what is the geopolitical, the strategic situation of Iran now, in 1 word, maybe it's good. But in 2 words, it's not good. Because we have woken up. And if they thought that they could really attack us on a multi-front level, and they use all their proxies. By the way, they do not confront us directly. The Iranians will fight until the last Palestinian is dead, or the last Lebanese, or the last Yemen Houthi, or the last Shia militia in Iraq or in Syria, but they are not confronting us directly. But they are, from a strategic point of view, they are losing. Because if they had a balance of power until the 7th of October, and yes, we were also deterred. We didn't want wars. We wanted to continue and develop the country and develop the technology and everything else. And that led to this appeasement, as I said. This has led to the 7th of October. But with the 7th of October, we learned our lesson. Once we learned our lesson, we are determined never to go back. You know, they say that if you are wet, you're not afraid of going out into the rain. This is what has happened to us. And just as we took out Hamas, a major proxy of Iran, we will take out the Hezbollah, another major proxy of Iran. The Israelis now will not allow Hezbollah to sit on the border, just they will not allow Hamas to sit on the border. We'll go back to the Hezbollah, but with the Hamas, what is the aftermath? You know, it may take 2 months, it may take 3 months. Gaza will be cleared. We will not leave any tunnel unturned over there or destroyed. After that, I think ideally, what should happen in Gaza is that Israel keeps the control over security. We will invite the Saudis to be in control of the economy. There will need to be a lot of rehabilitation and reconstruction over there. The Saudis can do that. The Saudis have an interest to do that. We will not allow Qatar to do it because Qatar is playing with with all sides. Qatar has a major basis, the largest basis of the U.S. military in the Middle East, but at the same time, they're best friends with Iran. And the U.S. Have always used them as a mediator. You know, they mediated the JCPOA 2015 between Iran and the United States, the nuclear agreement, which is a very bad agreement. They always were in between. They were actually helping negotiate between the Americans and the Taliban in Afghanistan. They are playing as the ultimate negotiator, but they were main help and main source of support politically, and now we see also military, certainly financially, to Hamas. So Israel will keep control of the security. The Saudis, economy, and the Egyptians will get the choice of the chance of first refusal to take care of administration and you know, take care of all the civil issues. When Israel will take care of security, is not just a buffer zone, but we will do what we're doing today in Judea and Samaria. So in military terms, the war in Gaza very much resembles the war of 2002 of the Second Intifada. And the Second Intifada also, it was the attacks, if you remember, the suicide attacks in Israel. And until we went on the offensive, they did not stop. We went into the offensive, and now, you know, we still go in and out of the Palestinian Authority territory, namely Area A of Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, as we need. And during the operation of Gaza, all eyes are focused there. But in Judea and Samaria, there are also very, very strong Hamas cells that the reason that they are not attacking in a brutal way is because we preempt them only on a nightly basis. And the same thing will continue in Gaza. That means after this intensive stage, when the Israeli military will be pulled back, we will always keep the freedom. And this will be in any agreement, I hope, that the government signs in the future with whoever is with the Americans, that we will always have this right for what is called hot pursuit. That means we can go in and out. If we see Hamas cell being built in Gaza, we have to go after it and not wait as we waited until the 7th October, same thing with the Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah, we're not looking for another war, although I can tell you that from a military point of view, we deployed what we deployed in Gaza, about 3 armored divisions maneuvering, plus 1 division of special forces, and this is not even half of the strength of the IDF. Certainly not when it comes to air power. So with the Hezbollah, again, we are not seeking a war. We are giving them the chance to withdraw by themselves. According to the agreement. They're not doing us any favor. All they have to do is fulfill the 1701 Security Council resolution. If they do not do that, we will have no choice but to preempt and throw Hezbollah north of the Litani, and maybe just even to take them out in a way that we do Hamas. Hezbollah is stronger than Hamas. They have many more rockets, more accurate, bigger ones. We may suffer losses. We will suffer losses. Although I can tell you the Iron Dome, again, was exceptionally successful. The Hamas launched more than 1,600 rockets. 1,600 is 16,000? 16,000. 10% fell upon themselves. They were mislaunch. One of them was on the El Madi hospital, if you recall. They shot their own hospital and then they accused us. And until the verification of the BBC and CNN and CIA called them out, the world was happy to accuse us. But out of this 16,000, I would say 99% were not effective. We suffered a few casualties, but minimal. There were just less than 5, and I don't think anyone was really killed by it. There's some injuries, but no death. So with all these rockets, Iron Dome did the job. With Hezbollah, it will also do the job, but again, I'm afraid over there it will be 10 times more rockets and more accurate. But we are now in the position that we understand that there is no other choice. When there is no other choice, we step up to the plate, and Hezbollah understands it. Even Nasrallah, which is usually very cocky in his speeches, you see he's speaking differently. Today he made a speech and he said, I'm not sure I will be still alive by Friday, but I am planning to make another speech if I will stay alive. He understands that, all stops are being pulled. Israel is ready now to do what we needed to do beforehand, but better late than never. So if I have to sum up, the Hamas and the Palestinians made few strategic errors. On the one hand, they underestimated our resolve. Again, they thought we are, too soft. Secondly, we didn't mention that, but the rift, the social and legal rift in Israel was also something that was not helpful. And if you have time for Q&A, we can discuss that as well. But what the Hamas didn't understand, when they saw us attack, Israel, Jews, we are feisty and we are opinionated people. We like to argue. I think this is a wonderful way of crystallizing and synthesizing ideas and self-criticism. So the Hamas and Iran thought, here Israel is weakened because of this rift. The Jews are divided. This is the time to attack. So error number one, they didn't realize that once they attack, all of us pull together, no matter if we are from the right, from the left, kibbutzim, from settlements, religious, Orthodox, Haredim, all pulling together like we have done before. We have not lost the spirit, quite the contrary. The IDF, once it called its reserve, 150% answered the calling, more than they needed, more than they needed. And so this was error number one. Their second mistake was that if they attack, then the world will stop us. The Americans will stop us, or the Europeans will stop us. They did not. Why? Not only because of the horrific slaughter, but also because we showed resolve. And when Israel shows resolve, when Israel is united, we can face up to any international pressure. They understand they cannot push us, and nobody was even daring to push us to stop or not to go onto the offense, because they knew it would lead to no avail. So we have the time. Hamas thought, and until now maybe they're thinking, this is in the issue of the hostages, that actually their call or their demand for ceasefire will come about with international pressure. But this is not the case, because Israel will not bow to any international pressure. When push comes to shove, you do what you have to do, and we're doing it, and we're doing it very effectively. The third mistake that they made, they thought that Iran would come into their favor. So remember what I told you about Iran, that they would fight until the last Palestinian, but not Iranians. And here they thought that this would cause a multi-front war. Well, it's not the case. Hezbollah is showing some kinds of movements over there, but it's not serious. Hezbollah doesn't want a war because they see what happened to Hamas. So you have the Houthis, right, which are another Iranian ally. So far, there was no damage by the Houthis. Again, Israeli Iron Dome, Arrow, all the Houthi firing was intercepted, either by Israel, by the US, some by Saudis. They didn't say that, but also by the Houthis are turning against their interest as well. And certainly not Iran, who is just poking the fire, but is not moving forward. So this was their third mistake. And now we are in a situation where the war actually has become almost a world war. And this is the next mistake that they are making, because if they think that by trying to block a blockade of the Straits of Hormuz or the Red Sea, the world will cave, it's just the contrary. Here I have some advice to the U.S., maybe gratuitous, but I think that it's not enough to threaten the Houthis. The Houthis have nothing to lose. The Houthis are a bunch of hoodlums with sophisticated ballistic capabilities that is provided by Iran. But, they live on a $1 a day. They are a desert country. They don't have anything to lose. Iran has a lot to lose. And I think here the focus should be Iran, not threatening the Houthis, but threatening Iran, because without the Iranian support and the supply, the Houthis would not be in any position to fire or to stop anything. Iran is very, very vulnerable. In our region, we say that if you live in a house of glass, don't throw stones. This is what the Iranians are doing now. But the Iranian energy infrastructure is very vulnerable. Without this, they will not be able to sustain their country even one day. And until and unless they are being threatened, not publicly, so they are not humiliated, but I think they have much more to lose than anyone else. At the end of the day, we see now the war has divided the world into two camps. One is the Western world, led by the United States, Europe, Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, all decent countries on the one hand, where Israel represents their own interest, and on the other hand, we have the jihadists of the Islam, led by Iran. Now, Iran would not be able to do what they do without two powerful allies that they have. One is Russia. Russia helps Iran politically and militarily. and the second one is China. China is the major economic support of Iran, circumventing the sanctions, but also in investments. By the way, in Gaza, we have found tons and tons of weapons and munitions, first grade. Most of it is Chinese made. China, Iran, Hamas. So I think this is a real turning point in the region. I would say also in the international arena. And this is why the winning of Israel over Hamas, over Hezbollah, the winning over the Houthis and Iran will make this region much, much safer and much better. And this will be also the best signal of deterrence to China vis-a-vis Taiwan. You know that the Chinese are eyeing Taiwan, and Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine, Baltic countries, or Europe. This is where we stand. So here, little Israel, proud Israel, strong Israel is really representing and saving the interest of the entire international community and Western civilizations. If you look at the map, of the Middle East, Israel makes 1/3 of 1% of the entire territory of the Middle East, right? We are the small country, but we are like a cork in a bottle that is simmering inside, and without us stopping what's bubbling inside, everything would be gushing out over to Europe and next to North America. And what is this cork stopping? Is Islamic Jihad. The Islamic Jihad does not believe in coexistence. They do not believe in peace. There is no negotiation or compromise with them, just with the Nazis. It's only unconditional surrender. This is Nazi Germany. This is Imperial Japan. This is the only way to do it. And Israel is the only one stopping this global jihad. This is why they focus all their energies on Israel. Because they know if Israel, God forbid, was not there, the world would be totally prey to the Islamic jihadists. And I think there were more than one American politician who said that if Israel was not there, the U.S. should have invented it or should have made sure it's there. This is where we are today. So still we're in the war. Look, the war on ISIS by, the United States-led coalition took almost 8 years until, and still ISIS is not totally defeated. Osama bin Laden took 10 years until the U.S. took him out. It will not take us that long to take Sinwar and the heads of Hamas, but it will take time. So with all this situation that we are now, it's like in the midst of the war, like if we were, to equate it to World War II and the Nazis, because there's no other comparison that I can think of. Hamas, Nazis, I would say we are now in 1944. 1944, D-Day, you remember, Normandy? This is where the war turned and still took about a year with lots of casualties until the Battle of the Bulge and everything, until they got into the bunker of Hitler. We will get into the bunker of Sinwar, again, sooner or later. It will not take that long. So I'm with all this grim situation, and again, we are paying a heavy price. I mentioned, the casualty comparisons, because this is what militaries do. Is what is the attrition factor? How many vehicle, how many tanks you lose compared to the enemy, because this is a main factor of victory. And how many men? Again, every man we lose, it's just the whole world, and it's just, really gut-wrenching and painful. But again, you see, in terms of military, hard military objective analysis, our casualties are minimal. Again, we lost almost 500 soldiers, but 350 was on the defense when they were not even fighting. That's what we have to remember. When the fighting started, you saw the real, I would say, proficiency and dedication and courage of the Israeli soldiers, because they know what they're fighting for. And this is why I am very optimistic. We will win the war with Hamas. We'll win the war with Hezbollah one way or another, either diplomatically. If not, it will be tough, but we'll have to do it. And this will put Iran in bay, because once Iran losing their two main cards, Hamas and Hezbollah, they will not be able in a position to threaten much. And last thing I want to say is really the United States is clearly behind us and understanding what's at stake. So we have really to thank the administration, the American people for this unconditional, uninterrupted supply of munitions. This is going very well. We have to thank the United States for the political umbrella that they gave us, fighting against ceasefire, because ceasefire would be a present to Hamas. The United Nations, of course, which is no friend of ours, they tried 3 times to impose a ceasefire. The United States vetoed it. And again, we have to thank that because, again, it's not just because of our great friendship, it's also American interests, as I mentioned. It's American interests which are also here at stake. One thing of advice, again, is that the US should be much tougher on Iran. If they don't take Iran now, and they can take Iran now just through diplomatic means, then we will find ourselves in a much bigger war later on. So this is the only correction of the path, diplomatic path, that I would advise the United States to change. Keep strong on Israel, and this is the best bet of the free world, is to bet on Israel for their own good, but have a much tougher stance on Iran. And if you need some help with that, Israel will help you vis-a-vis Iran as well. I can tell you that in many ways. And we have the capabilities, and I think we don't have to prove it again. So with this is pretty much a summation of the situation. The war will end, and the country will continue to flourish. In Independence War, 1948, there were 600,000 Jews fighting. We were surrounded by 100 million hostile Arabs. We took casualty numbers which is in proportion unimaginable. We lost in the Independence War of 1948 6,000 men and women dead, killed. 6,000 out of 600 is 1% of the entire population. Just think, 1% of an entire population. If today the US is 330 million, just think, losing 3.3 million. We lost 1%. In 73, which was another terrible war, which also we were surprised, also there was appeasement, also there was slumber and all that, but we came back. We lost in Yom Kippur 2,700 dead. At that time, we were about 2.5 million Jews in Israel, and we suffered 2,700. The proportion went down. Today, we lost, as I mentioned, 1,200, civilians, 173 until now soldiers, but we are 7.7 million Jews. So you see how actually the proportions keep waning in terms of casualty. Israel today is a strong country. A country with more than $45,000 per capita, right? Never lost to countries or to organizations with $3,000 dollars per capita, or 4,000, or even 10,000. But if it's not just the economy, it's not just the military and the strategic capabilities, it's also the culture, the Jewish culture, the Jewish faith, the Jewish belief, the Jewish morality. This is what takes us, and also the Jewish camaraderie. I would say almost chavruta. When there are attacks, we come together. After the war, don't worry. We will continue to fight each other and to call names and to argue, especially on the political level. There's no escape. We will have to have new elections after the war, but this is not of our wars now. Now we have a war to win. We're winning it. And the last thing is, again, thank you so much. I think the resolve of the Jewish community worldwide, but especially in the United States, this is where the majority of the Jewish population live outside of Israel. What you have done in terms of your solidarity, in terms of your campaigns, in terms of your donations, everything that you do is just warming our hearts and making us, as you mentioned, Rabbi, tougher, taller, and better Jews. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It was extremely informative. And I love what you ended with. Israel is 1/3 of 1% of the Middle East. And we are the ones who are holding up the entire world. And I think we all need to realize that every one of us, although we are not in the Middle East, are part of that 1/3 of 1%. And the way we stand every day is the way we are upholding the world. I want to mention two things before we start the questions and answers. One is that the next Thursday evening, that's January 11th, 7 to 9 p.m. at Abrams Hebrew Academy, there's going to be a very special event where there are going to be two students from universities speaking about what is going on college campuses today. I think it's very important for anyone who has a child to know what's going on firsthand, hearing from the students themselves. And there is also going to be a survivor of the October 7th massacre who is going to be there to share her experience as well. So it's going to be a special event, January 11th at 7 p.m. at Abrams Hebrew Academy. And I also want to mention that we happen to be running our annual raffle to support our Jewish Learning Academy. You can buy a ticket on your way out, $100, and we could do more and more of these events. So if you can support us, we'd be very grateful. We're going to have a Q&A, questions and answers. Question and answer means question and answer, which means if you have a question, ask the question, don't give a speech. And we want to hear what the ambassador has to say to your question. But that's really what our focus is. So we're going to invite Ambassador Daniel Ayalon back up to take some questions.
Wow. You want to call them? Because you know who has the better questions. Okay.
If you can stand up when you're asking and just speak out loud.
Okay.
Was the appointment of Cameron in his new office a positive for Israel? And what is the situation with Erdogan?
Okay. You mean Cameron, in Britain?
Yes.
Well, it's almost inconsequential for Israel. Britain is not a major supplier of military equipment. Today, the Israeli military is stronger than the British one in terms of numbers and in terms of capabilities. But it's good to have a friend in the UK. I think the UK has been okay. Germany has been great. So I don't think it will mean a change of policies of the UK. The UK, by the way, also, they abstained in the UN on the ceasefire thing. So they are not all the way with us, but at least halfway towards us. Erdogan is Hamas in ideology. Erdogan is a member of the AKP. AKP is the Turkish party. AKP means justice and peace in acronym of in Turkish, but they are part of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. The only difference between Erdogan and Hamas is that Erdogan is not Arab. He's a Turkey. He's a Muslim, but not Arab. And Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood are Arabs. This is the only difference. Great deal of support from Turkey to Hamas. There are charities, Turkish charities, that have given a lot of money to Hamas and also are poking a lot of, stirring up sentiments, Muslim sentiments against Israel and the Jews by claiming that Israel wants to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. But interestingly, with all these acrimonious and political attacks by Erdogan, he did not stop one iota of commerce and economic cooperation between Israel and themselves. Two reasons. First of all, Turkey benefit a lot from that. Israel for Turkey is quite strategic because when the Arab world went up in flames and Turkish merchandise could not go on a land bridge through Syria and Iraq, they used Israel and Jordan. Secondly, they still want Israeli natural gas. Israel today, we have found a lot of natural gas in our economic waters in the Mediterranean. And the Europeans very much would like part of it. So they're talking about big projects of pipelines from Israel. There are three different technologies today. And the idea is to go through Cyprus, Greece, all the way to Northern Europe. Turkey is very much is concerned about that. They would like it to go through Turkey. They will never go through Turkey, but this is why they're still keeping, Israel on, let's say, on their side economically. So Erdogan cannot help it in terms of his ideology in Hamas, but for their own economic benefits, they continue full relations with Israel. It's quite amazing. So what should Israel do? Well, if they want to continue with economic cooperation, so I think we should continue, and we're doing that. We also benefit from that. But when it comes to Turkish advice, he can go elsewhere. Not, for instance, the Turks now are thinking of sending a Turkish peacekeeping to Gaza. They can forget about that. There's no way Israel will give them even the slightest foothold in Gaza. By the way, we still remember we and the Arabs also, the Turkish occupation, in the Ottoman era, which decimated the land. When the first Zionists came into the land, there were no trees in the land. And today, Israel is one of the few countries that has more trees today in the land than 50 years ago, if you look at anywhere else, including the rainforest. So the Turks were occupiers, just like the British were occupiers, just like the Romans and the Greeks and the Assyrians and the Mamelukes. And when you're an occupier, you don't take care of your home or the land. So we are back at home, and still there are some who call us occupiers, but they can, continue and try and reverse history. I think we should keep pressing the point that you cannot be occupier in your own home. And this is what we should drive in. If we're talking about campuses now and the problem, the Palestinians have painted us as occupiers and colonialists. And this is when you have ignorance, of students who do not know their history. They are prey to the incitement, and we are outnumbered because they continue and drill this incitement and the message, just like Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda. If you, repeat a lie 1,000 times, it becomes truth. This is what we are facing. So I think it is very important for us to press 2 points. We are at our home, the land of Israel belongs to the Jews as the Jews belong to the land of Israel. Full stop. Not being apologetic, but state the facts. And the second thing is that if the Palestinians, if in the international community, They say, push on Israel. Israel should give land. Israel should give up because occupation is the problem. Or the Palestinians are the poor side. This is not the case. It's not about the Palestinians. It's about global jihad. And this should be the second message. Israel stops global jihad from taking over not just the Middle East, but also Europe and beyond. So these are the two messages. This is for the campuses, if anybody. Hi.
What needs to be done to free the hostages?
Wow, what can be done to free the hostages? Well, I'll be brutally honest, not much. It's terrible. But at this point, what does Hamas want? They say we will free the hostages not only for a ceasefire, but if you get out of Gaza altogether and keep us, Hamas, in charge of Gaza. This is like committing a suicide. So so we will do everything to try and free the hostages, but we cannot do that on the expense of future hostages, because if we keep Hamas as they want, what they want for freeing the hostages, we will be in the same situation maybe 5 years down the line, 10 years. So what we are trying to do is find the kind of a middle of the road. I think it was very important that we helped releasing the 112 that already were released, and for that we paid in ceasefire days. Israel is willing to pay in ceasefire days for that as well, for more, but not their demands to just stop the operation and pull back our forces and let them take Gaza all over again. So this is the bind. If there was a way to militarily free the hostages, we would have done it long ago. But it's very difficult. And Sinwar himself, he's the head Hamas guy. He is probably in deep down bunker in his place in southern Gaza, Khan Yunis, and he's probably surrounding himself with hostages. This is also why we didn't take him out yet. So there's still negotiation, tough negotiation. But I believe that with more time elapsing, Hamas understanding that maybe time is not on their hand. They thought time is on their hand. This is why they were very tough. Total ceasefire. We didn't want the we didn't cave, and they released these 120 hostages. I believe at this point also, if we cave in now, maybe we will save the hostages, but we will lose many more in the future. So this is why it's gut-wrenching, it is tough. We have a moral duty for the families and for the hostages. I mean, Israel government is responsible for them. Had it not been for the slumber of the military and the appeasement policy, there wouldn't be hostages. So certainly we have a duty to bring them out. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. The positive scenario is that Sinwar and Hamas will realize that we are not going to cave in. And if we are not going to cave in, then I think he will release the hostages if we will allow him to spare his own life. And we are willing to do that, to take, not to kill him, to let him and all his cronies outside. We will have time to reckon with them later. But this is the best offers that Israel can make. Offer them a free passage, saving their own lives, and ceasefire. And this is where the negotiation is. I believe that with time, again, the optimistic scenario that with time, he will realize that Israel is not caving, and then maybe he will release the hospital for his own life. That's pretty much the strategy.
You talked about the emissions you've got in the United States, but in the future you may not have such a friendly government. Isn't it important that Israel build up their own munition capability?
Absolutely. Again, yes, the question was that, can we always rely on future administrations in the United States? Why doesn't Israel, or will Israel planning to have its own self-sufficiency when it comes to military supply? Absolutely. Again, for economic reasons, we closed down assembly lines of artillery and tank munitions, and many other, also air ground operation. We are going to put them back together. It takes about 18 to 24 months to put new assembly lines, but we are absolutely going to do that. Absolutely going to do that. By the way, the military industry in Israel is flourishing, is booming, also because of the war in the Ukraine. But we have had billions and billions of sales, including Arrow batteries to Germany. There are many others in line to get that. Iron Dome. By the way, we supplied 2 Iron Dome batteries to U.S. military for peripheral protection of American bases. But you are absolutely right. The only thing that we are not doing is we're doing platforms. We have the tank Merkava, which is comparable, I would say, with the Abrams and the best tier 1 tanks in the world. We don't have platforms for aircrafts. This is not something that I can think of us doing at this point, but I would say the policy is to be able to defend ourselves by ourselves and to be able to be self-sufficient as long as possible. Sometimes in wars, time is of the essence. And part of, has always been, if you look at Kissinger memorials, about Yom Kippur and why the U.S. was always helpful to Israel, was that they realized that if Israel feels alone, and if Israel is not being resupplied, then Israel will have to shorten the war. How does Israel shorten the war? By using extraordinary means. And this is something that, has always been on our side. So for the, as far as the eye can see, I think the U.S., again, for historic reasons, for value reasons, democracies and all that, but also for interest reasons, the U.S., whoever is in the White House, will continue. Again, if they are not, wanting to shoot themselves in the head, they will continue to supply Israel. But certainly, as much as possible, we will bring back production capabilities. Yes.
How does Israel prevent the radicalization of future Palestinian generations?
Yeah.
And also, is there any plans of population transfer?
Okay.
Palestinians that Gaza to friendly countries?
Okay, so about radicalization, there's not much we can do because we're talking about a culture of hatred. It's not like in Germany. In Germany, there was denazification, took 3-4 years, and Germany became a great democracy. Same thing was in Japan. It's not the case here, unfortunately. And we have learned our lesson. When Biden now is speaking on a revitalized Palestinian Authority to take Gaza, it immediately reminds me of Bush. I worked very closely with President Bush, 43, during the Intifada of 2000 from 2000 to 2004, basically. And at that time, the first idea of a revitalized Palestinian Authority came already in 2003 by President Bush. And what was the idea then? Was, okay, Arafat is no good. We have to push him aside and find somebody else who will, change the ways of the Palestinians Authority. He brought in Abu Mazen. And, Abu Mazen, was change of face, maybe cosmetic change, nothing in terms of the incitement, the curriculum in school, the financing of terror, the delegitimization of Israel, BDS, nothing has changed, only face. So when now talking about revitalized Palestinian Authority, I say, okay, but we have to learn from our mistakes. So in that case, we need a Palestinian Authority which will be totally peaceful and believing in coexistence, which will change completely the curriculum in schools, which will arrest all the imams in the mosques that call for the destruction of the Jewish people, which will stop financing the terrorists and terrorist families, which will stop inciting against Israel in the international community. And if this is the case, then maybe we can think about coexistence. How long it will take? I would say at least 3 generations. So there is it will be futile to talk now about a Palestinian Authority taking over Gaza. It will just be futile, and it will it will backfire like it has in the past. About transfer, well, we have to understand what are the moving parts, what are the forces here. So you have the Arab countries, which are very much against it, and you have the international community, which is very much against it. So there is this, I would say, there should be 2 considerations. The one consideration is the political diplomatic consideration, that we should not promote it or talk about it. But on the ground, I don't think it would be bad to encourage it, in peaceful means. I think many, many Palestinians in Gaza would love to leave the area. The same is in, the last thing they want is to be really under this yoke of Hamas or the corrupt Palestinian Authority. But I think here, the less said is better. And again, here we are in a closed room. The best leader Israel had in modern time is David Ben-Gurion, because he did not talk much, but he did a lot. So anybody who speaks out, and they're a politician in Israel to do that, they are doing it for their own political benefit, because this is the Israeli sentiment. If you take a poll in Israel, everybody would be for letting the Palestinians live elsewhere in much better lives. But if you talk about it, you prevent it. And those who say it out loud, they know it will not happen. The more you speak about it, the less chance it happens. But they just want to collect naive votes, and this is the danger here. This is why the less said is better. How do you handle it? Well, in terms of well, as I mentioned, it will take probably 3 generations before we can even, negotiate with whoever is there about peace and about economic cooperation and everything else. Until then, there is no way that you can, if you connect, as the Palestinians want, Gaza and the West Bank, you cut Israel into 2. There's no way we will allow it. So some say, okay, so in order to protect yourself, let's build a tunnel. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, think about a tunnel. Until 7th of October, tunnels could have been entertained, maybe, of connecting Gaza into the West. But I think they lost that thing forever because tunnel has a different connotations for us now. Now, about Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, as I mentioned, Israel is the IDF presence over there is what really keeps us safe. By the way, not only us, it also keeps Abbas and the Palestinian Authority safe because Hamas, again, it's Hamas and the global jihadists, right, which are run by Iran, they are against Palestinian Authority as much as they are against us because they believe in one Sharia Muslim state. Now, Abbas, because of corruption, because of intimidation, because of whatever, doesn't have the wherewithal and doesn't have the will to fight them. We are doing it. And the same thing we will continue to do in Gaza. What we're doing now in the West Bank, we will do in Gaza a year from now, 10 years from now, but we will not allow what we're doing now in Judea and Samaria, Area A, is that we not allow Hamas to build in strongholds. Every time there is a ring or a network, we take them out. And certainly, when we detect any kind of digging, we take it out. This is the lesson that we have had. So, in that sense, our vulnerability in the east is much greater than in Gaza. First of all, it's a much longer border, and secondly, it's close to all our most strategic installations, the airport. So there is no way ever that we will, I hope, as long as we have normal governments, allow any build-up like they had in Gaza.
I have a question about education. So looking to the future and looking at where education is now, which is, of course, brainwashing, I think. Looking at UNRWA, is there a way of getting rid of UNRWA because they've been basically part of this whole problem?
Yes. Well, part of the cleanup of Gaza is also dismantling UNRWA. UNRWA was not in bed with the terrorists. UNRWA was not aiding the terrorists. UNRWA are the terrorists. This is what we found. And every day in the UNRWA schools, we find, posters from, grade 3 and up, posters of weapons, of how to, create a detonation device, how to throw grenades. This is what they teach in UNRWA schools, let alone, of course, the fact that they teach in the curriculum that Israel should be erased and that they should take over. This is UNRWA. This is the UN. So this, I think, now we were telling everybody about that, but now we have the hard evidence. So it will be very difficult. Well, even with the hard evidence, they will tell us that, it's not the case. But I think we should be strong enough not to do that. We have to understand that UNRWA, which was built in order to alleviate and to do away with the refugee problems, they are the ones who perpetuated the refugee issues. And again, you're talking about Palestinian Authority. You know that the Palestinian Authority, just in Gaza, there are still refugee camps. You heard about refugee camps. We're talking about neighborhoods now of people who have been living there for 75 years. The Palestinians, through the Oslo Agreement, received more money per capita than the Europeans after World War II, the Marshall. Part of the money was to actually do away with refugee camps. Now, the Palestinian Authority, they have, through the Oslo, 40% of the West Bank is under Palestinian Authority. And they have all these refugee camps. They were supposed to take care of this, to take care of their people. They got the money to do that. But what did they do with the money? What did Hamas do with the money? They kept them in these inhumane conditions and put all the money in for military purposes. So UNRWA is, as far as Israel is concerned, UNRWA is done with. With the U. Well, it will depend on some innovative diplomacy, but I hope now that countries like the UK and the US understand that UNRWA is the problem, not perpetuating the problem, not the solution. Yeah, sure. Well, yeah. So again, out of respect to the U.S., we have a debt of gratitude to the U.S. and also to Blinken. He's the one steadfasting against the ceasefires and the condemnation of Israel and all that. So out of respect, I would not tell him that he's wrong. I will just tell him that whatever he thinks of will take time. How much time? I mentioned 3 generations, and then we can speak. But I will not say no. Why? That's Rabbi Weinstein asked me what about diplomacy. We talked. The secret of diplomacy. So one of the secrets of diplomacy, what is the good diplomacy, is when you send someone to hell and he looks forward to the ride. This is good diplomacy. The second one is don't say no. Say yes, but. If we need the money, yes, it will be very helpful. Absolutely. The supplies, not that it's critical. Israel is not dependent upon that. Israeli economy is fairly strong, but anything helps. And I think more than the monetary value is the political value, because Iran and Hamas shows that Israel has America has Israel's back, and this is a strong message as well. So I think for that it's very important.
You mentioned that a lot of American money comes from the string. It has to be spent in the United States.
All of it today. All of it. All the money that Israel gets. Actually, I don't call it, we don't get money. I call it defense cooperation. Until Barack Obama, the $3.8 billion, 75% was spent here. After Barack Obama, 100% is spent here of this aid.
We're reading here that Iran is enriching uranium and incredibly that. How does that change the strategy of Israel's ability to get that? Years ago, we also heard that Israel would never allow that to use the Hamas and Avalon. Where are we with that? What's your plan on strategy?
So it has not changed. I think American position has not changed, at least verbally, that they will not allow Iran to become nuclear. Iran is certainly taking advantage of the situation where the world's focus on Gaza or in the Ukraine and continuing with the enrichment. But here again, I think that if I go back to one of my points in the beginning, that there should be a strong message from the US to Iran, not only in the issue of the Houthis, allowing or freedom of navigation, but also on the nuclear issue. And as I mentioned, Iran is vulnerable. And with credible military threat, they will suspend all their operations. Well, they have done it in the past. Voluntarily, they stopped enriching in 2003 when they thought the United States is serious, when the U.S. flanked Iran on both sides, on the Afghanistan border and the Iraqi borders of Iran. And this is what we need to see, leadership. Now, in hindsight, there is a debate in Israel. The 2015 agreement was a bad agreement, but some say, well, it was better than no, than no agreement. Then in 2018, President Trump withdrew from the agreement and he put a maximum pressure, economic pressures on Iran. Some say maybe it was a mistake because there was no plan B. I would say to Trump's credit, I would say that he did not plan to lose the elections in 2020. So had Trump stayed, the maximum pressure could have made Iran yield, because they could not have sustained 4 more years of maximum pressure. So the problem was that there was no plan B. And when Biden took office, he lifted off this maximum pressure. So actually, we lost on both sides. So right now, Iran is in a position where it's much more advanced in its nuclear program on the one side, and they do not suffer much of the economic sanctions. This has to be reversed. This has to be reversed. And as I mentioned, we are now in the midst of a war of clipping their proxies, clipping their Iranian tentacles. But we will not escape dealing with the head of the snake, with the head of the problem. The problem is Iran, and we'll have to take care of it one way or another. I think it's not just Israel's issue. By the way, the Saudis, all the Arab Sunni countries are dead set against Iran, just as Israel is. Actually, even more so, because they know they will be the first ones to be under the Iranians' attacks or aggression. Hence the Abraham Accord. After the bad nuclear agreement of 2015, you have to understand how it was looked in the Middle East. The Saudis, the Muslim countries, the Sunni Muslim countries, when the U.S. signed this agreement with Iran in 2015, for them it was a clear signal that the U.S. is changing its policy, turning it upside down, actually ditching the Sunnis and promoting the Shiites. This is exactly what was the message. Hence, they came to us for security cooperation. And this is what led, at the end of the day, to the Abraham Accords in 2018. By the way, another thing, you notice that the Abraham Accord countries have not broken one iota of the agreement. Not Morocco, not the Bahrain, not the Emirates, which means that they put all their fortune on Israel's side. This is another blow of Hamas and Iran. Until now, they say that this attack was also, was also one of the many reasons of the attack on the 7th was that here Israel and Saudi Arabia were coming together. Well, they will stop that, quite the contrary. And I can assure you that if there was the slightest chance of Israel losing the war, you would have seen all the Abraham Accord countries running away from Israel and being very obedient with Iran. This is not the case. That's another miscalculation of Hamas and Iran.
One final question.
Okay.
You spoke about thinking of historical perspective and that saying in 1948 there were 3 major ethnic conflicts, one minor one in the third area, and it was settled by separation of populations.
Or you're talking about the Evian and the...
Indian subcontinent, Cyprus, and what's supposed to happen to the Shiites. They are protected much more. As that was the most successful result in these ethnic conflicts. We're left with what we have now because of the failure to separate. I know you mentioned it before about a question regarding separating Gaza, and it was, Gaza border was legitimately open on armistice lines. And Israel's now having kilometer border.
Oh, the buffer, you mean?
In reality, it's including stuff in the bucket. Is there any, you might not want to answer this question, is there any intentions of going further? There's no, really, the only way is to separate the populations and therefore Gaza has to be somewhere else.
Well, without much talking about it, Israel is changing the landscape in Gaza. And the first thing we were doing is really taking out all the buildings and infrastructures that had a direct site to Israeli communities. So these are all obliterated, and we will not allow that to be built again. The buffer will be very, very important, but more than the buffer is what we call the freedom for hot pursuit. This is something that Israel will not give up. That means we will not allow Hamas to spring back up, and we will have to go in and out with special ops, just as we do today in Jenin, in the West Bank, in Tulkarem, in Jenin, in Jericho, everywhere else. At the end of the day, it's just who has more resolve, who has more patience, who has more stamina. We have more stamina. We have the wherewithal to do it. We have the wherewithal to deal with Gaza. We have the wherewithal to deal with the West Bank, as we do now. We have the wherewithal to deal with Lebanon and the Hezbollah, even if they came out all together. Again, we would suffer immensely, but we will come up ahead. And I think at the end of the day, this is what our enemies understand, that we are not soft as they thought, we are not appeasers as we thought, and that at the end of the day, we have much stronger capabilities than them. And this is, unfortunately, this is the lay of the land, not just in Israel. It's not a matter of kumbaya, it's a matter of balance of power internationally. If you look at history of humankind, there are more than one history professor who says that actually we were in a constant, from time immemorial, from Cain and Abel, we are in a condition of war, interspersed with a few, periods of peace, supposedly. But most of the time, it was wars. And unfortunately, it's still the case now. We have had, I guess, too many good years of stability during the Cold War, when we had two centers of powers, no more. And again, I think the only thing that will bring peace on earth is only if our Chabad rabbis will be diligent enough to bring the Messiah sooner than later.
Thank you. It's excellent. And then Naomi, a special evening. Thank you very much for arranging this. Thank you, Ambassador.